Why does the church exist? The church exists for the glory of God. For that glory of God to be seen in the exaltation of His Son, Jesus Christ, the crucified, resurrected, and reigning Son of God who promises to return for His people. What a beautiful story. But how muddied and how tragically corrupted that narrative can be when the very people in place that's supposed to herald that story has done so to the neglect of caring for children with safety and concern for them. Hi, my name is Eric Bancroft from Grace Church here in Miami, Florida, and I want to just take a minute and talk to you pastors and fellow ministry leaders. Specifically, I want to talk to you about child protection. You know, I had the privilege and the opportunity to be sent by my local church to seminary and to be trained in the responsibility to handle God's word and to know how to shepherd God's people with the use of that word, both in preaching and teaching. And over the years, by God's grace, I've been given the opportunity to lead in different ministry contexts as an associate pastor, as a senior pastor, as a church planter. One of the things that's been noticeable to me in my past training is that at no point did I receive training about how to manage the church by way of protecting the church. I think the challenge for us today in ministry, understandably and open-heartedly, is to kind of basically say, come one, come all. We want you to be with us and hear us and let us get to know you, which is really, really right-hearted, but might not always be right-headed, especially when it comes to the care of our children. Too often our children are entrusted to the care of well-intended and seemingly well-liked older men and women, adults, if you will, who offer to volunteer. And if you're like me and having been in a church planting context, you're thankful for anybody that would offer help because you certainly feel like you need more help than you actually have helpers. The mistake, though, can be that you unknowingly put your children at risk with these, again, right-hearted but wrong-headed practices where children are not being protected, but they're being vulnerably placed in the care of others. Perhaps you, when you were a young child, you were taught by your mom or dad, a grandparent, or some other person who cared for you to watch out for the creepy van with the tinted windows. And by all means, certainly kind of look concerningly at such places and people. But the reality is, and the statistics show, that most abuse happens by trusted family or friends in our seemingly circles of trust. And I don't mean to say that we should now begin to look at everybody suspiciously, but I also think that we should not be so naive. And we certainly want to teach our parents how to have good practices at home with their sons and daughters and how they interact with others, but also in our own children's ministry to recognize if we're not careful, sadly and tragically, abuse can happen in our own churches. And we want to do everything we can to keep that from happening. So one of the things that we've done at Grace Church in Miami, Florida, is that we have implemented the protocols and processes that the experts, legal and social and responsible experts of ECAP have given to us and how to provide good care. That is anything from background checks to child training to reference works and things like this that we really want to do so well. We want to steward well the lives entrusted to us. So I really encourage you to find out more about this ministry and to be a part of the solution and not unknowingly facilitate the problem. One of the questions can be, how do we implement the processes and the education needed to have this be a part of the culture of our local church, a culture of safety? One of the things I commend churches to do is to speak from the pulpit, from the platform on Sunday, to let the parents know of what it is that their children are being taught. What are these great truths that they're being reminded of? And so that when they get in the car with their kids and they're being reunited, they're not just getting another handout, another colored drawing, but they can be taught about these are seemingly servings of fresh spiritual food that they can talk about with their sons or daughters in the car, at lunch, or in the days that follow. But we also want to encourage our parents to be aware of What kind of processes and protocols do we have at the church to provide safety for their children? So speak openly and honestly about this. One of the things that we highly recommend, again, under the advisement of ECAP, is to have a safety coordinator and an advisory team of people who have been given this responsibility. They have thought through these things. They've written out the protocols and processes. They have the plans in place. And they, again, think through these things with great detail. Too often, churches address this conversation, this concern, too little and too late. They don't think much about it, and when they do begin to think much about it, it's because they've had tragically an incident that's been reported. And what I want to encourage you to do is to get on the front end of this, to think proactively that we want to think about this now so that tragically we don't have to think about this later in a reactionary position. And so one of the things I want to encourage you in your church is to think thoughtfully, responsibly, biblically about how the gospel message can get center stage without any distraction or deviation, without any dilution of conversation, that it would be a clarity as to what is the most important thing, Jesus Christ, and that there would not be seeds planted of bitterness, distrust, fear that comes from people's experience having been in church as a young child, perhaps brought by a neighbor, a friend, a parent, a relative, with the stated reason to teach them and to introduce them to others who knew Jesus, only to find out that they were tragically a victim of someone's deviant desires. So I challenge you, think carefully, act responsibly, and love truly with the protocols and processes in place that can make your children's ministry and your church overall a safe place for both young and old alike to be together in fellowship.